Thanks, Jonathan.
Yeah, thank you very much.
So my name is Venkatesh Hariharan. Most people call me Venky, and I'm a senior fellow at the IDFC Institute, which is an organization that has, it's a think and do tank. We work with policymakers across India, and we also help them with implementing programs. So we recently got a grant from Omidyar Network to set up something called the Data Governance Network, and we felt that privacy needs to be looked at from multiple perspectives, and we can't look at it from just purely privacy maximization, but you have to also look at how do you maximize the value of data. And I think as part of that overall effort, one of the understanding that we came to was that industry also needs to be sensitized to the concerns around privacy. And we set up something called the Privacy Working Group along with the Digital Lenders Association of India. So if you can go to the second slide. Jonathan, can you go to the second slide?
Sorry, just one moment, Venky. Apologies, little technical difficulty here.
No problem. I'll just talk through that.
Yeah, we'll be with you in just 1 second.
So the context in India is that there has been a lot of concern around privacy, and the Indian government recently, the Supreme Court rather, recently passed a judgment saying that Indians have a fundamental right to privacy. And as part of that, there is a committee that was created to create a bill around privacy, and that committee reframed the debate in a very interesting way by saying that by shifting the responsibility from the users to service providers. So currently the norm was that caveat emptor or buyer beware. And from there, the onus is now shifted to the industry to ensure that they manage that data responsibly. And it also prescribes civil and criminal liabilities for misuse of data. Another interesting thing is that, compared to other geographies, the way the language has been structured is it basically implies that there is a relationship of trust between the service provider and the users. So the bill introduced terms called data fiduciary. So if I am storing your data, I am a data fiduciary to you, and you are the data principal. You're not the data subject, as the geographies term it. And I think that's a very important mindset shift, which completely resets the expectation. And we felt that it would be good to work with industry to see how they respond, and also work proactively to build responsive institutions. The the concern that the people who framed the bill have is that once the bill is in force, the Data Protection Authority should not get flooded with complaints. So the logic that they employed is that if industry creates self-regulatory organizations, then some issues can be sorted out within that self-regulatory organization. Issues that cannot be sorted out at that level can be escalated to the sectoral regulator. So that may be the insurance authority or the banking authority or the healthcare authority. And finally, if that also does not work, it goes to the data protection authority. So the idea is to kind of sort out the challenges and the complaints at source, as close to source as possible. So we felt that so we identified the Digital Lenders Association as one of the organizations that we could work with. We will also be working with other organizations in banking, healthcare. We're looking at working with the smart city initiatives in the Indian government to create a privacy working group there. The Digital Lenders Association is a very young organization, about 3 years old, but this industry has attracted a huge amount of venture capital. The DLAI, as they call it, now has almost more than 50 members attracted in just a short span of time. So, so we put that. So we created this working group, and we identified some key stakeholders who had a long-term commitment to privacy, and work with them to set up this working group. Can we go to the next slide? So the terms of reference for the working group is to review the Justice Sri Krishna Committee report and the Personal Data Protection Bill, the draft Personal Data Protection Bill. Also come up with an impact assessment for the DLAI members. The challenge, of course, for industry is that most of these people are busy setting up their businesses, building their user base, etc., and the technology base, etc. So understandably, these are all people with very little time. So what we thought is, let's create a briefing paper which summarizes the impact of the report, and follow the what we call the 3A model: awareness, appreciation, and adoption. So ensure that all the DLAI members are broadly aware of the impact of the privacy bill. Work with them to do workshops so that they appreciate the impact of it on their businesses, and work with them to ensure that the self-regulatory norms are adopted. So the other goal also is to ensure that the industry people look at, understand the bill, and then also represent to policymakers in terms of how the bill affects them. So, for example, the bill has certain norms saying that you have to limit data collection. Some of the people in the industry have argued, saying that at this point in time, sometimes we collect, for example, telecom data, and we don't know exactly how that has an impact. So the thing is, the goal is that tomorrow you will be able to correlate that data and understand how telecom data correlates to better credit ratings. At this point in time, if you limit that collection, then you are actually ending up curbing innovation. So the idea here with the Sri Krishna Committee report and the privacy bill is to maximize the value of data while minimizing the harms of privacy. And this kind of a healthy exchange of information helps the government also to understand how that can be done. Can we go to the next slide? So the risks and opportunities for the digital lenders are that, one is, I think, fundamentally, it's a reset of operations, because if you're moving from a caveat emptor to a caveat venditor kind of a scenario, it's a complete sea change in how they manage, store, process data. There are severe regulatory risks in the form of restrictions on business and punishments for violation, and it's a huge impact on user trust. The opportunity for the industry is that they will be able to sync with global data protection laws and operate across geographies. We also visualize that user trust will be a competitive advantage, because digital lending is not a market where winner can take all. You do not have the kind of network effects that you have in, say, social net media, etc., or messaging services like WhatsApp, etc. So we expect that user trust will become a competitive advantage. Can we go to the next slide? So the political economy of the for the industry is that currently India is going through elections, and a new government is expected to be formed next month. And once the new government is formed, the bill will be tabled in Parliament, and the Parliament will call for consultation. So it gives an opportunity for the industry to represent their views in front of the government. It's also an opportunity to showcase India's thought leadership in terms of data protection in the fintech sector in the global context. Can we go to the next slide? So, so in summary, what we aim to do with this privacy working group is to generate impactful industry-specific recommendations and engage with key internal and external stakeholders. And the goal is to impact public policy in such a way that we can grow the digital lending industry while protecting users' privacy. So let me stop there and wait for questions. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Venky. This is Kay McGowan. That was great. I'm going to usurp Jonathan's moderator prerogative since I'm here in the room and ask a question. I'm really interested in this idea of how you foster user trust in societies as diverse as India's. Obviously, the investments and innovations that have been put in place in the last few years have really expanded the ability of lower income, perhaps lower literacy segments of the Indian population to start participating in these digital services, whether they're public services or commercial services. But that obviously brings a lot of questions around informed consent, which we've seen has extreme limitations even in highly literate populations. So I'm wondering how you guys are thinking about consent and bringing these more kind of vulnerable populations into this potentially exciting, but also somewhat fraught new world of the data era. Thanks.
So there are two parts to that. One is, how do you take users' consent in a better manner? Can we do that better? And that is, to some extent, it's a legal challenge. It's a UI UX challenge. And what we have seen is that in countries like India, you need to take consent in multiple languages. We also have a significantly large population that is not literate. So therefore, people are experimenting with providing notice through audio files, through videos, etc. And we have seen in some of the surveys around privacy that people have also expressed interest in these kind of notices, which are in video format, since they don't understand what exactly is happening. The other thing is what we are also hearing from people who work on financial inclusion in really impoverished communities, etc., is that the first question everybody asks is when they are feeding their data into a mobile phone, what happens to my data? So everybody across the board is really concerned about that, and the industry needs to be sensitive to that. On the technology side, there is models like the digital empowerment and protection architecture, which provide the framework for giving consent. And there's also mechanisms for the consent to be audited at the back end. I'm sorry, there is some crackers going off in the background. I hope that's not disturbance.
Nope, we can hear you.
Great. So there are frameworks like DEPA, which are digital frameworks for sharing data. The other aspect is you have to, where there are misuses of data, there have to be strong punitive measures. So for example, in today's newspaper, I read that an organization that counterfeited medicines was given a very strict, given a very stringent fine by the judge. And he said that, this kind of playing with people's life cannot be allowed, and therefore we are imposing a very stiff fine on you for violating the and imitating a drug. I think those kind of punitive measures will also be important. So it's basically the carrot and the stick kind of an approach. Does that answer you? It's a very wide-ranging answer, I know.
It does. Thank you.